Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Radical Anthropology group. This evening we have Jacob, who is nervous apparently, and I've told him he's not allowed to be nervous because he's a professional actor. He performs in New York, off and on Broadway and around the States. In 2013, he was the recipient of the Linda Cross Playing Shakespeare Award from the New York Shakespeare Society. So he's got absolutely no right to be the slightest bit nervous or have any kind of stage fright. I've just said all that because I read his short bio, but for me, Jacob is a very staunch, although quite recent member of the Radical Anthropology group over the other side of the Atlantic, and he's been part of our book club. For some of you might be interested to know that we do readings together, a few of us, and I don't know what it was exactly, but every time Jacob spoke, he seemed to, I don't know, he spoke in a different way from other people. It sounded far more wonderfully sonorous and meaningful to me at any rate. And every now and again, Shakespeare would kind of come out. And I'd never really thought that there could be human origins in William Shakespeare, but actually the most absolutely centrally is. Of course, one of the things which Rags always said is that Claude Lévi-Strauss was correct when he said that all the world's magical myths and fairy tales are variations on a theme, and ultimately one myth only. And it does seem as if Shakespeare was well aware of that myth. So over to you, Jacob.
Thank you. And before I begin, I just want to extend a great thank you to Chris and Camilla. My play was shut down March 12th of last year, and I haven't been in a theater since. Oh. And in that void, Reg has popped up, and the amount of energy and generosity and challenge, Camilla, that you've given me has grown me in incredible ways that I can't wait to get back into the theater and put this to use. But thank you so much to you two, and to Mark and to Ian and to Morna and Jerome. I don't know you, but the work has been very impactful. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. And a thank you to Amy, who has sat through 5 versions of this talk and has helped me bring this to you. So to begin, Anthropology of Shakespeare. It was Ben Jonson, a contemporary, who said that he was not of an age, but for all time. And now 400 years later, he's still relevant. The plays are still relevant. They will certainly outlast me. There's something that seems to be timeless, something that's trans-historical, trans-personal, trans-cultural. It's been translated into 100 different languages, Hamlet alone into 75 different languages, so even translingual. There is something intrinsically human going on in these plays. And I'm going to explore how Chris Knight's sex strike theory illuminates underlying structures in the plays that are distinctly Shakespearean, but may owe their logic to the origins of culture. So where am I coming from? I am not a scientist. I am not an academic. I am an artist, a performing artist. So my training and my expertise is in the doing of these plays. And my relationship to the work is through the body and through feeling and the experience of performing these plays with other people. Now, in terms of Shakespeare, this giant book is not Shakespeare. This is a blueprint. And just as a blueprint is not a house, and a house much less a home, the blueprint would need material to build the house. And then the house would need Hestia, the hearth, warmth to make the house a home. So too, this blueprint needs a body. It needs to be embodied, and then it needs to be given a human soul to animate it, to vivify it. So the trouble with textuality is that these plays were not written to be read. They were they're not even written to be published or studied. They were not considered literature or elite. They were written to be performed, to be heard. So this giant book is a book of communal experience. It is also a use of the English language that is, it's pre-technology, it's pre-cognitive revolution, it's pre-industrial. Like we still talk about making babies, making friends, making love. And then we come up with things like man the tool maker. This language is before that. It's pre-capitalist, it's pre-colonial. The nascent seeds of many of these catastrophes are directly on the horizon, but this language is still connected to the earth. It's still connected to the sky and to the soul. And it's a language that connects a very flexible cosmology of sun, moon, stars, to an ecology of earth elements, plants, animals, and to human psychology of the mind and the heart. And these three levels of the physical, the psychical, and the spiritual or celestial. So this world and the other world, or as Shakespeare says with Hamlet, to be or not to be, that's the question. Now, with Shakespeare's scholarship, the focus is usually on the text, the words on the page, which is exactly what the censors were also reading. At a time when playwrights were being arrested and tortured, these plays are written to intentionally deceive the reader. The subversive elements are in the stagecraft, in the casting, in the performance, and the participation with the audience. So to understand these plays, you have to get up and you have to speak it in front of people. Now, in terms of anthropology, I think in the theater and we share a similar investment in the same question, the fundamental question of what makes us human. And anthropology explains through various disciplines, while theater recreates and reflects the experience of being human. But theories of man the warrior, man the toolmaker, man the hunter, apart from just being bad stories, they're unplayable when it comes to Shakespeare. They don't work. You bring them in the room and half of the bodies in the room have nothing to do, the women. So you can't play it. And I couldn't find throughout my career a bridge to deal with anthropology until encountering Blood Relations by Chris Knight, where the female collective body and female reproductive and strategic agency is not only in the room, but it's center stage. And this theory activates every body in the room. So let me share my screen and go very lightly through sex strike theory, very lightly, and share. And then we'll take that into Shakespeare. We good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so sex strike theory, the origins of symbolic culture when female-led coalitions supported by male kin went on sex strike to motivate final males to provision the community of women and children with meat. Animal fat and marrow that was essential in fueling the growth and function of increasingly large brains. The symbolic domain emerges through collective female defiance, expressed as ritual performance, reversing the normal signals of animal courtship, mate recognition depending on signals of right species, right sex, right time. Right time meaning fertile. Now, by harnessing the signal of menstrual blood, real and symbolically amplified by the cosmetic use of red pigment, female coalition signaled wrong sex, wrong species, wrong time meaning infertile. As Power and Watts writes, gender at origin is inseparable from ritual power and from ontological ambiguity. Humans metamorphose into non-humans, females into males. Gender signals both counter-dominance, mobilizing the powers of the weak, and counter-reality, forcing all participants and onlookers to engage with the symbolic, non-perceptual world. Now this is then set to a lunar template where we have menstruation happening at dark moon, separation, kinship, sex strike, followed by the hunt and bloodshed, going to full moon, where the meat is cooked, fires are lit, and marital sex feasting is allowed until the next dark moon, where we start again. Now, to look very briefly at the ethnographic record of the Khoisan Elan bull dance and its reflection in the male initiation ritual, this is extremely resonant for my work in Shakespeare. The Khoisan being the first people of Southern Africa, and the Elan bull dance being the climax of a monarchal girl's initiation rite. She may become the Elan bull, wrong species, wrong sex, wrong time. She may also become the male hunter. So she has access to both the hunter and the hunted, also the male moon, male rain. And by performing male roles and powers, she moves towards a third gender, what Power and Watts term a gender of power, an ambivalent mix of both male and female. Now, the reflection in the male initiation ritual, the boy hunter's first kill, once his arrow hits the animal, drawing blood, he is at once identified with the hunted animal. The hunter becomes the hunted. After limping back to camp, he becomes the same as the menstrual girl. Lewis Williams writes that the neophytes are like the eland, considered to be sexually ambivalent. The girl is spoken of as if she were a hunter who has shot an eland, while the boy is secluded and cared for as if he were menstruating. Power and Watts note the escalation of ritual power, with each sex plays pretend as the opposite sex when becoming ritually potent. Gender operates inside a binary framework, oscillating between ritual potency and a relaxation of ritually imposed taboos, and noting that this conforms closely to Judith Butler's metaphor, gender is drag. Now, focusing on the two specific taboos that are included in that, both initiates are kept out of the sun and must not touch the earth. In the Golden Bough, James Fraser concludes that the general effect of these rules that are found all around the world is that the girl is kept suspended between heaven and earth, and likens that to insulating her power and potency. He then draws parallels between these and observances of priest kings in the ancient world, that they somehow needed to be perceived as menstruating to take divine power. We will come back to this. Now, for a Shakespearean, this reflection of rights is very, very exciting. Early in his career, Shakespeare wrote the long poem Venus and Adonis. Now, Adonis is very clear the image of the male menstruant. But focusing on the description of the boar attack reveals something very keen in Shakespeare's ritual intuition. In the source material, in Metamorphosis by Ovid, he locates the boar's thrust beneath the penis. Arthur Golding's translation, English translation, reads, and hiding in his cods, his tusks as far as he could thrust. So he locates it in the testicles. Shakespeare, however, so both of those are focusing on a castration, on a loss of masculinity. Shakespeare diverges from the source myth and inverts Adonis's gender. Bring it back. So we have Venus saying, 'tis true, thus was Adonis slain. He ran upon the boar with his sharp spear, who did not whet his teeth again at him, but by a kiss thought to persuade him there, and nuzzling in his flank the loving swine, sheathed unaware the tusk in his soft groin. So like the Khoisan male initiate, he struck the boar and drew blood, first blood. The boar turns and the hunter becomes the hunted. The boar's wound then makes Adonis like a monarchal girl. Also, the attack is turned into an act of love, sheathed into his soft groin. So from the blood of this wound, Adonis is then transformed into a flower through the power of Venus. Instead of a loss of male potency through violence, castration, Adonis gains potency by being opened like the opposite sex through love. And this is one of the core myths of Shakespeare's work. It also links directly into the Sumerian Inanna and Dumuzi, going back at least 6,000 years. Now, unlike many initiations where the male menstruation is used to steal the ritual power of the women and justify their subjugation and solidify a patriarchal counter-revolution, Adonis does not steal the power of Venus. He does not win dominion over her. Through his death and transformation, he is brought back into relationship through love, opening a vulnerability that brings the male back into mutuality, reciprocity, and interdependence. This is the crossroads for the male characters in Shakespeare: the corpse or the flower, domination or relationship, tyrant or partner. The corpse leads to the tragedies, permanent death. The flower leads us to the comedies, rebirth. Now, looking at the comedies, female characters signal male through behavior and through actual disguise, while men become performatively female when in the throes of love. You can hear Romeo screaming, "Oh, sweet Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate." Shakespeare combines what is for the Khoisan separate rites of initiation and juxtaposes them so that the two move towards each other, towards an ambivalent gender of power in what is now a rite of courtship. And this gives us an extraordinary intimate opportunity for scenes between equals. As they move towards each other, you have Rosalind as Ganymede with Orlando, or Viola as Cesario with Orsino, and scenes and interactions that would not have happened if the heroine wasn't signaling male. In this painting, I just point out that this is Venus and Adonis, and the same model was used for both characters with slight augmentation, but they've both moved towards each other. Now, there is a key distinction, however, between the heroines and their male counterparts. The heroines are usually conscious of their conversion, what is termed artificial fools. They assume a gender of power as insulation, a skin change that allows them agency, license, and access to the world otherwise denied her, and to get closer to her male counterpart, and to be taken seriously. They are coded in dark moon, wrong time, wrong sex. The men, however, are natural fools. They're buffoons. They're unconscious of their folly. Wounded by Cupid's arrow, like the boar's loving tusk, they're made vulnerable, open, expressive, and feeling, and changeable. The gender of power takes possession of them, which makes them dangerous. They signal full moon at the wrong time. They're lunatics. So, in Much Ado, we can hear how the inversions are coded here with an emblem of matrimony as a man yoked in the stocks in a skirt. Benedict, speaking of the newly love-struck Claudio, "I've known when he would have walked 10 miles afoot to see a good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake carving the fashion of a new doublet. He was wont to speak plain, to the purpose, like an honest man and a soldier, and now is he turned orthography. His words are a very fantastical banquet, just so many strange dishes." Beatrice gives us more, here with an emblem of Hercules spinning in his mantle. "Is he not approved in the height a villain that hath slandered, scorned, dishonored my kinswoman? Oh God, that I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace. But manhood is melted into curtsies, valor into compliment, and men are only turned into tongue, and trim ones too. He is now as valiant as Hercules that only tells a lie and swears it." Going into As You Like It, Orlando begins fighting with his brother. "Wert thou not my brother, I would not take this hand from thy throat till this other had pulled out thy tongue for saying so." Here he's just wrestled with Charles the Wrestler and won, but then he meets Rosalind and she rewards him with her chain, and he's transformed, skipping through the forest of Arden, hanging bad poetry on trees. Run, run, Orlando, carve on every tree the fair, the chaste, and unexpressive she. Now, idealizing Rosalind, stuck in full moon lunacy. For Rosalind, in a world of no divorce, facing a world without end bargain, her inversion allows her to slow the courtship process down, interrogate Orlando's love as a perceived equal. By the time we get to Act 4, Rosalind is disguised as the boy Ganymede, who is role-playing Rosalind to teach Orlando how to woo it. Now, originally, a boy actor would be playing Rosalind, playing Ganymede, pretending to be Rosalind for the full effect of gender ambiguity. She tries to ground Orlando in the reality of who she is, the oscillations from dark moon and full moon. No, no, Orlando. Men are April when they woo, December when they wed. Maids are May when they are maids, but the sky changes when they are wives. I will be more jealous of thee than a Barbary cock pigeon over his hen, more clamorous than a parrot against rain, more newfangled than an ape, more giddy in my desires than a monkey. But will my Rosalind do so? By my life, she will do as I do. But she is wise, or else she could not have the wit to do this. The wiser, the waywarder. Make the doors upon a woman's wit, and it will out at the casement. Shut that, and 'twill out at the keyhole. Stop that, 'twill fly with smoke out at the chimney. Over and over, she brings the romantic mode, the high romantic mode of Orlando down into the images of earth, the animal, the marketplace, and the home. Now, I want to take a moment here to shift the focus to the theater itself, where these representational liminal rites are being performed. Victor Turner drew a distinction between liminal rites and liminoid phenomena like the theater, and I think it's worth clarifying a bit. I think many of us will be very familiar with Van Gennep's rites of passage, the transitions from one sociocultural state or status to another. He put it in 3 stages: separation, a liminal phase, and incorporation. Separation is leaving the mundane world, a world of either or, binaries, rigidity. The liminal phase is the inverse of those social norms, gender reversal. It's an and both paradigm, paradox, ambiguity, both this and that, betwixt and between. And then incorporation, when the initiate is reintegrated into the collective in a new identity. Turner puts these in tribal communities, central to the community, and they function by inverting normative structure. And these rights are enforced, determined by natal birth. Now, in complex societies, Turner says, where contract replaces natal status as the major social bond, liminal becomes liminoid, liminal-like. These are decentralized rights. They exist in the leisure sphere, on the outskirts and in the margins of a city. They're transgressive, separate from the central political and economic processes, which makes them experimental in nature and designed to present alternatives to the dominant structures and institutions. So rather than invert the normal from within, the liminoid ritual is designed to subvert it from without. As Turner writes, drama exposes the injustices, inefficiencies, immoralities, alienations, and the like held to be generated by mainstream modern economic and political structures and processes. And rather than being enforced, they're a choice. This for Turner was a great advancement in human freedom. Now, Shakespeare's comedies are showing us a combination. So there's a courtship rite, going from single to married, and an initiation rite, going from adolescent to adult. So the characters are experiencing liminal rites in the liminoid space of the theater. A little complicated, but with all of the hostility towards ritual and imagery during the Reformation, these theaters emerged on the outskirts of London to preserve the ancient festive traditions, the characters, the rites, and the images of the people. Now, if we take a look at a map of the theaters, we can see the walls of London here. And all of the public playhouses are in the suburbs and on the outskirts. on the outside looking in. The liberties of Bankside here on the south part of the River Thames. You can see them here, and this is the coronation of Edward VI. Across the Thames, outside of the city walls, was Bankside. Taverns, brothels, lodging and gaming houses, fencing, cockfighting, bull and bear baiting. There was a madhouse, hospitals, lazar houses, prisons, and scaffolds for public execution. Now, there's a particular affinity between brothels and the playhouses, the sex workers and the players. According to Gary Taylor, players and prostitutes worked in the same buildings, lived off the same customers. The whorehouse and the playhouse alike stood on the uncertain periphery of the city and the law, condemned but condoned, persecuted and permitted. So there we are. And as you can see in this, this rendering, the city of London is very ordered, very structured. And when, like in a fairy tale, when you go into the other world, when you go into the enchanted world, you have to cross a threshold. So to go from separation into the liminal space, we have the actual River Thames, the river crossing into the other world, where we have our theaters. Focusing here on our Edward, I just want to point out that he is on a horse, so he's not touching the ground, and there is a canopy over his head, so the sun does not touch his head. If we remember, that starts with monarchical rights, and it's alive and well here in mid-16th century. If we go to King James, he is being kept off the ground by the carpet, and he has a canopy over his head with a symbolic sun, so that the actual sun doesn't touch him. Here he is with the Knights, the Order of the Garter, our lovely garter, a symbol of female fertility, stolen or appropriated by Edward III. And there was the saying that Elizabeth was our king and now is James our queen. Here's the globe. So if we take that logic of the monarchical rights, we have a platform stage. The actor is not touching the ground. Above his head is a roof out of the sun. So there is some type of ritual potency that is between heaven and earth. The very stage is built on this right. So there's something about the actor's potency that is being insulated by the globe stage. Now, what this power is, I'll start with Bakhtin's notes for what he termed the topography of Shakespeare's images and stage. Now, as we've discussed, Shakespeare's images exist in a dynamic between the celestial and the terrestrial. In the theater, the heavens are real. It's this roof. So when Hamlet speaks of this most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave o'erhanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with golden fire, he's talking about this actual piece. I'm going to go back because this is worth going back for, to justify my assertion that this stage is built on monarchical rights. We have a Puritan revolt against the players and the playhouses in Bankside, in which the writer writes, "Then surely neither can God's wrath be qualified, nor his pestilential arrows which fly amongst us by day and lethally wound us by night, be quivered up till these menstruous rags be torn off by the hand of authority from the city's skirts, which so besoil and coinquinate her whole vesture." And then he glosses what he means by menstruous rags. The body players of Bankside. With all the stuff going on in Bankside, the taverns, the gaming houses, the public executions, what he picks out as the problem are us. So the menstruous rags are on this stage. That is the golden roof. When the actor looks up and references the heavens and the sky, it's a physical coordinate. it's an actual thing in the space. Hell is below those boards, in the hollow space under the stage, the underworld. The decking becomes our earth, and the actor stands suspended between the poles. As Hamlet says, what should such fellows as I do, crawling between earth and heaven? We have actual coordinates available to concrete human experience. And an actor can gesture, and we know what he's referring to. Bakhtin separates the imagery into two levels: cosmic topography, used by the high characters in the court, earth, sky, hell, heaven, life and death, the elements, the classical body, the closed body, and then the bodily topography, used by the low characters, fools and clowns. Heaven becomes the head, hell becomes the bowels. Images of sex, food, drink, excrement, the lower bodily stratum comes into the space in the grotesque body, the open body. Bakhtin writes, in Shakespeare's images, both poles are always given, hell and heaven, angels and demons, earth and sky, life and death, top and bottom. They're topographic, they are cosmic, all the elements of the world, the entire universe are implicated in their play. Shakespeare's image always feels hell under the feet and heaven above its head, i.e., it feels the actual topography of the stage. So we're constantly bringing the inner experience of the human soul into relationship, these ligaments from the inner to the cosmos, the celestial, to the bodily, the terrestrial, extending our expression to the very limits of the universe. For an example, Othello says, all my fond love, thus do I blow to heaven. 'Tis gone. Arise, black vengeance, from thy hollow hell. Yield up, O love, thy crown and hearted throne to tyrannous hate. Swell bosom with thy fraught, for 'tis of aspics tongues. So in 4 lines, he's gone from heaven to hell, flipped topsy-turvy, hate into love into hate within the swell of his body, of his bosom, and then attached that sensation to a nature symbol of aspic's tongue. Amelia goes with the bodily topography later on with, 'tis not a year or two shows us a man. They are all but stomachs, and we all but food. They eat us hungrily, and when they are full, they belch us. So the image goes up and down between the high of the mouth, eating food, into the stomachs, into the bowels, and when they're done, they belch us up. So the image is high, low, high, low, high, low in the body. We heard earlier in As You Like It, Rosalind tried to ground Orlando's fancy to real life, bringing high to the low. Now, when the topographical collapses, when the arts break from the cosmic and from the body, when our images become static or realistic or cliche, officialized and serious, it becomes about an individual's inner experience in isolation from others, from the body, and from the world. Bakhtin continues, to make an image serious means to remove its ambivalence and ambiguousness, its unresolvedness, its readiness to change its meaning, to turn itself inside out, its mystifying carnival essence. It means to stop the turning of cartwheels, its tumbling, to declare something stable and unchangeable. The merger of front and rear and fast spinning, and of top and bottom, heaven and the underworld, and fast rocking, to stop the spinning and the rises and falls, to place upright facing the audience. Now, in the theater of Shakespeare, we are rebuilding the connections. Each play has the coordinates, bringing our inner experience back into relationship with the world, the body, and with others. Now, let's look at the power of the player. What is being insulated by this stage? Looking at the chorus of Henry V, which we think is the first play to be done when they built the Globe. The chorus comes out and says, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, the kingdom for a stage, princes to act and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should a warlike Harry like himself assume the port of Mars, and at his heels leashed in like hounds should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. So what he just did there is he brought King Henry onto the stage. By naming him, he brings him to the stage and then raises him to the heavens and associates Henry with a god, Mars, and then stops. Oh, but pardon, and gentles all the flat and razed spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Now he says, I can't do what I just did. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? So within 2 lines, he has now brought this space low to a cockpit, which means that he just took Henry, raised him to the point of being a god, and in 2 lines, dropped Henry to a cock in a cockfight. So we're set up into a world where we're not sure if Harry is a bestial tyrant or whether or not he's a great king. And this is the power of the language. So that Shakespeare is setting up these worlds of rabbit ducks, where we're not sure which one we're looking at. The ambiguity of this space and of this theater, we're going from high to low, high to low, high to low, high to low. Now, if we need to do this play for the authority of the censors, we just take out the ambiguity and say, it's a rabbit. He was a great king, loved him. We might take out a couple lines and we might take out some of the bits, but we just level all of the images to be serious. Now the language, the most famous speech ever written, shows us this language and how the language goes high and low and brings them together. He combines these extraordinary passages of complex images and Latinate words which would dazzle the galleried audience, and then includes inner translations of the speech itself in straightforward, monosyllabic, just good old Anglo-Saxon English, so that anyone in the theater could follow the play. It's an extremely generous technique. So a brief section of this, to be or not to be, that is the question. We all get that. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Now, if you didn't understand a word of that, it means to die, to sleep, no more. And by sleep to say we end the heartache and 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep. If you didn't get that, it's okay. To sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. That's what we're talking about. Now we can actually trace how this translated to an audience, because we have the bad quarto of Hamlet in 1603. We have this that's thought to be a traveling theater company's version of the play. And we think it was the actor that played Marcellus, because all of the scenes that Marcellus is in, the language is perfectly Shakespeare. But all the other scenes are misremembered horribly. But what we have is a direct translation, a direct download of that Anglo-Saxon language. So the play translated, even if you weren't educated. So the high is brought low, so the play goes forward. So to be or not to be, aye, there's the point. To die, to sleep, is that all? Aye, all. No, to sleep, to dream, aye, Mary, there it goes. Right? And as an actor, you can feel when you lose the entire audience. When you have one of these 4, 6, or 12 line images of Shakespeare, and you just feel the whole audience go cold. Have no idea what you just said. And to know that you have a simple, it means to die, to sleep. That's all. It's just an extraordinary generosity of this playwright and a deep concern of this playwright that we all go through it together. Now, to wrap up, we'll look at a play where the heroine doesn't dress as a boy, but still signals male through behavior. Looking at the lunar template. Now, patriarchy froze the world up here: marital, midday, surrender, availability. Now, Shakespeare looks at one play where we get stuck in Dark Moon, which is which is also a problem. So we're going to look at Taming of the Shrew. It starts out with an induction that gives us the conceit of the play, that class and gender are performative conventions. What matters functionally is being on the same page, a shared reality, not whether that reality is actually true. So it positions then Taming of the Shrew as the play within the play. So here we have Christopher Sly, who's a drunkard, who is dressed up as a lord. He wakes up and the page boy is in a dress playing his wife to convince him that he's a lord, and it works. Then the players come in to perform an entertainment for him, and that entertainment is Taming of the Shrew. Act 1, we meet Catherine. She's living with kin, wrong time, playing the father, running the house, wrong sex, and coded as the shrew, wrong species. Kate the Cursed. She is our anti-romantic romantic heroine, wild and thunderous, noise, weeping, wet, all signals of Dark Moon. But she's stuck in the gender of power. So the question of the play is, how do we get Kate to experience periodicity? Especially when there are no acceptable options in Padua. Everyone we meet in the beginning of that play is awful. Enter Petruchio. He's a stranger to the city. He's come to find a wife. So he's an outgroup male looking for marital sex. He is full moon. I come to wive it wealthily in Padua. If wealthily, then happily in Padua. As anti-romantic as Kate. Now, since Kate is stuck, it's up to Petruchio to be extremely flexible. Not traditionally played this way, but if he's stuck in machismo, then the play becomes severely abusive. It loses its carnivalesque. It becomes serious rather than ambiguous. So we'll look at how this sex right logic would impact Petruchio. In the wooing scene, it's private. So he's allowed to shift his gender. So he plays the lover, and as we've seen, the lovers are coded as female. Say that she rail, he says. Why then I'll tell her plain she sings as sweetly as a nightingale. Say that she frown. I'll say she looks as clear as morning roses newly washed with dew. Like Orlando, his language is full moon, high romantic, and like Rosalind, her language drops his images to the earth, dark moon, body and body. Act 3 is their wedding. It's public, so he has to signal male. But he comes dressed as the Lord of Misrule. He is dressed as a fool. He comes late. He swears at the altar. He punches the priest. He throws the sops in the sexton's face, and grabbing Kate, kisses her lips with such a clamorous smack that at the parting all the church did echo. His behavior paints Kate as though she's a lamb, a dove compared to him, therefore coding her as female. The carnival inversion continues. Abducted from Padua, a perilous journey to Petruchio's home, she falls off the horse and is immersed in mud. When she arrives in Verona, dietary and sexual taboos are instituted. So a rite of incorporation has been inverted into a rite of separation. Act 4, Petruchio's house, we're in private again, and Petruchio can shift his gender. They arrive with Petruchio riding pillion to Kate on the horse, which in Elizabethan England was the female's position. Kate takes on the role of the husband when she enters the space, so Petruchio responds by inverting his gender and playing the wife. All of what he does is scripted straight from the conduct books of the day. He institutes fasting, no sleep, no marital sex, all for her own good, all holding the logic of Kate's dark moon. She wants the perks of full moon in the form of fatty meat, fat tripe, finely broiled, neat's foot, beef and mustard, but Grumio, reflecting his master's role as wife, with no meat for her health, to which she beats him and curses him. Kate finally capitulates by agreeing with Petruchio that the sun is the moon. Finally, they are in the same convention, the same reality. Consciously absurd, clearly wrong, but participating in a convention that is all but conventional. We see Kate in alignment with another human being for the first time. And we should note that Kate is the only heroine without female support. At the banquet, Act 5, it's public. Petruchio plays the good husband. Kate playing the good wife, right sex, right species, right time, and instructs the women on their proper place in the infamous speech. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life thy keeper, thy head thy sovereign, one that cares for thee, and craves no other tribute at thy hands but love, fair looks, and true obedience. She goes on and on and on and on. She plays the game straight through, extending the speech much longer than necessary. And Petruchio responds with, why, there's a wench, and they're off to bed to consummate their wedding, full moon. And we are furious. No matter how you play that last speech, whether it's a game between them, whether she's reformed and she believes it, or that she's been forced against her will to do it and it's harming her, any way you play it, it's still intolerable. And people have been screaming about it for 400 years. Now, Chris Fitter offers the theory of disresolution, a kind of carnival frustration. He terms it the killjoy effect. So the scene is building for Catherine to erupt. The buttons keep getting pressed. She's resisted long enough, and we are ready for the unruly woman to break through. But Shakespeare subverts the carnivalesque response. The pendulum has been swinging back and forth the whole play, back and forth, and our bodies are experiencing and expecting, desiring this shift in power. And then the expectation is frustrated on purpose. It generates upset, a sense of injustice right before the audience is going to go back into the streets. Now, he wrote a play in which a straight reading of the contemporary standards for women's conduct is experienced as an obscene violation of a woman's true being. The societal norm is now met with our own revolt, with our own carnival license the play has raised up in us. Now, in response to this play, John Fletcher wrote The Women's Prize, or The Tamer Tamed, where Petruchio remarries Maria, and she gets all the women in the town into her father's house, and they go on sex strike to teach Petruchio a lesson. It follows the structure of Lysistrata, and it was played together with Shrew. Shakespeare's own response to this play can be seen more subtly in Love's Labour's Lost, where four men vow a 3-year sex strike, no meat, no sleep, no festivity, to focus on their studies. So now it is the men who are stuck in Dark Moon, and the women who control the game to bring them out. And it looks like we're headed for a typical comedic ending with 5 marriages, when news that the princess's father has died, and suddenly a stark reality is brought into the end of the play. And the men's antics up until that point now seem deeply offensive. These are not men, these are entitled, uninitiated boys unfit for the real world. And the princess calls for a sex strike until the 12 celestial signs have brought about the annual reckoning. Tasks are enforced on each man, each his own initiation rite, and the play ends with separation. You that way, we this way. Now, these comedies all end with something not quite right. We're usually denied the wedding rites, the completion of the rite of passage, the incorporation. But we feel the loss of something magical as the liminal phase begins to fade and a new mundane reality begins to emerge for our heroines. Perhaps we also begin to remember that our real world is waiting for us outside the theater, that we too shared in the license afforded the gender of power, that we too are being put back into a convention. Whatever it is, Shakespeare leaves us with something unresolved, something out of tune. We love Rosalind as Ganymede. We feel let down when she's back in a dress. Merchant of Venice, there's no real sense that the men learned anything from breaking their vows, and Jessica is left alone at the end as her husband celebrates the prospect of her father's death. We are unsure of all 3 suitors. 2 gents were dissatisfied with Proteus's conversion. Much ado, Claudio doesn't earn hero's return. All's well. All's well. Nobody likes Bertram, ever. ever. Helen can always do better than Bertram. Measure for measure, Angelo doesn't earn our forgiveness. And the Duke's sudden proposal to the ultra-chaste Isabella resonates with Angelo's coercion and attempted rape of her. The 12th night, Viola postpones the reconciliation with her brother in Orsino. If nothing lets to make us happy both, but this my masculine usurped attire, do not embrace me till each circumstance of place, time, fortune, do cohere and jump that I am Viola. Effectively signaling wrong time, wrong sex. While Malvolio exits shouting, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you, Viola ends the play as Cesario, and we are left to wonder why. And as we saw with Taming of the Shrew, Kate's final capitulation calls for the play to begin again tomorrow night, when the stage will rumble and Kate will return and speak I will. I am no child, no babe. My tongue will tell the anger of my heart, or else my heart concealing it will break. Over and over, we are suspicious of these men, keeping eyes on them as the wedding trains exit the stage. These plays call for a vigilance, that a pendulum of power requires continual engagement, effort, and commitment, and that the surrender of power comes with the knowledge that we must take it back again, soon, that the peace and the resolution is only temporary. There is no happy ever after. Like the Byakuya performance of a Gengi revivifying male potency and return to normal life, in Goku lurks in the wings, ready to reclaim center stage. Shakespeare's comedies leave us poised. The rites of passage conclude off stage and drift through our imaginations. The cost for their new status is a loss of innocence. The adolescent is replaced by a more mature adult. But a sense of a new order restored is undermined every time, with the sense that rather a new ordeal is about to begin, another passage, another problem, another play, but certainly not a fixed, stable, serious hierarchy.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow, that was amazing. Brilliant. Thank you. Oh my God.
Thank you, Jacob. Yes, that was incredible.
Thank you.
Right, follow that, somebody.
There's been a lot of interesting chat in the chat on theatre stages and those Hebrew and Greek words. Does anyone want to say something about it? Anybody? Yeah. This site of the topography, they're both Hebrew and Greek words that are linking the theatre stage to altars or else ritual directly. Obviously, theatre comes from context of Greek ritual, of course. We know that.
Can you hear me? First of all, thank you so much. That was incredible, Jacob. And yeah, I just wanted to add that bit that the word in Hebrew, bama, comes from the Bible and was literally used for altars, particularly pagan ones, obviously. So yeah, it just connects to everything you were saying. So I just wanted to add that. And of course, this opened this amazing trajectory of other commentary, which I personally am very grateful for. Also about the Greek connections and everything else. Okay, take it from there. I can say a bit more, but
Jacob, this presentation was catharsis itself.
try to leave it unresolved.
Wait.
Yeah.
In Dreamtime coming.
Yeah. Well, it's very odd that it's not very odd. It's very telling that when we work on these plays, we spend so much time trying to make them feel good at the end. Like there's this expectation that we should be happy at the end. But if you came into the theater from the same world I came in from, it's not realistic. A happy ever after. Whenever the happy ever afters come with the fairy tales, there's something betrayed in us. And I think Shakespeare's very keen to that. And when we leave the theater upset, I think that's his gift.
So you think that Shakespeare wanted us to leave the theatre and start a riot?
Yeah, well, there's certainly evidence of it. The Jack Cade bits in Henry VI, there were the apprentices on the anniversary of the insurrection did a week of rioting, and then Sir Thomas More had similar crowd scenes, and the censor said, you put those in the play after Henry VI, and you do that at your own peril. Also, Richard II was commissioned by Essex the day before the revolt. And so when Elizabeth was told that Essex had Richard II played at the Globe before the insurrection, she said, I am Richard II, don't you realize? So there was a very, very direct conversation happening.
Could you explain?
Jacob, what's the film that the film that portrays that? There's a film about it. A guy, a lord, I've forgotten his name now, who is presented as the author of Shakespeare's plays.
Anonymous.
Anonymous, yeah.
Anonymous, yes.
Yeah.
Since you know so much more than I do, let alone other anyone else, can you just tell us a little bit more then about that period of history and what these insurrections were and who Shakespeare was and whether he was, Catholic, Protestant? I mean, all those, just a little bit more, just to sort of connect up the politics, the surrounding politics with what you've been telling us.
Sure. Oh, that's a contentious thing to do. The authorship question is massively fraught, and I'm happy with it being fraught. I think there are direct indications that Shakespeare was meant to be ambiguous, that we're not supposed to know who this person is, and that what was written by Shakespeare was incredibly dangerous. The way that the plays are structured is through a system of complementarity. So it's a complex binary. So it takes two opposed principles that are essential to each other. You can do it on gender, on male, female, or you can do it with reason and passion. You can do it with mercy and severity. And each pole has aspects that are desirable and aspects that are destructive, both. So in the tragedies, one of them collapses and the whole world falls down. In the comedies, we find some way of keeping the system going and tolerating each other and working together. The mutual dependency model that we looked at in the beginning, that is a complementarity model that comes from human origins, and it goes through mythology. The wives of the sun and the moon would fit that model perfectly. If you look at Othello, you're looking at Othello, Desdemona, reflected by Iago and Emilia. And when these things can't work together, the whole system collapses. When that system goes into a trinity that is all male, all white, and all good, then it becomes very, very, very dangerous to be any other body in that system. You're expendable. And those are very dangerous stories. So Shakespeare's bringing in archetypes that have been cut out. In terms of Protestant Catholic, you can read the play and go, there's the Protestant line. You can also read the play and see all of the Catholic signals. And in scholarship, academics take 300 lines of a 4,000 line play, line them up and say, there, Henry V was a rabbit. All you have to do is go, that's great, let me just flip the other signals on. Henry V was a bloody tyrant. And what Shakespeare is asking us is to put both of those things together. That, you know, as an actor, I'm always looking for the tension in the scene, the energy. And so if you have an idea that's right, there's nothing to play. You need to bring in the perceived opposite into tension. And it's that overlap that creates the transcendent third, or the vesicapiscus. If you overlap the circles, you get that yonic power that brings something in from the other world into this world. So we're always going for thesis, antithesis, bring them together, deal with the fact that it doesn't feel great. We have to learn how to hold that tension so that something else can come in that comes from all of us. And the bonobos would be really proud, because the whole point is to include our enemy. We can't tell the play if we don't bring our enemy into the space and work it out. There was a production here in New York of Julius Caesar, where they made Julius Caesar a red wig, a blue business suit with a big red tie, and then they killed him on stage. And everybody in the audience knew who that was. And it takes all the ambiguity out of the play, because you know what side you're on. You're either with him or against him. And people started protesting and breaking up the play because they were supporters of the tyrant. And so the entire theater broke down. The play was constantly interrupted. And Shakespeare's saying, we don't know. We don't know what side we're on. I thought it was a rabbit, now it's a duck. I guess I'll keep watching. So he's forcing us into ambiguity. He's forcing us into relationship. And no one wins. No one wins who comes out of a relationship. So someone like Richard III, who says, I have no brother, I am like no brother, I am myself alone. The great individual is the most toxic thing on the stage, and everybody dies, including the tyrant. No tyrant wins. No tyrant makes it to the end of the play. Unless he goes through a very deep turnaround through community and through suffering, and is reborn as a different identity, his own liminal rights, which is the end of the writing career, if that helps.
Very much.
Jacob, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Or say, this is Claire. That was just so magnificent. I mean, it was just really total heaven to listen to and watch, you know, your presentation. And the only thing which I tiny bit, even though I totally agree with it, I also a little bit disagree with it, is what you were describing about how people feel when they're coming out of the theater. And when I've seen these plays that you're talking about, I mean, I'm curious, maybe actors are feeling angry, but I never feel that way. I feel like ecstatic and empowered. And I think it's because of exactly what you're saying, because what's wrong has been, you know, sort of portrayed in an embodied way. I feel it's like the truth has been told, you know, the truth has been felt. We've all been feeling it together. And just as an individual, as a human being, that makes me feel so empowered through and through. And as a woman, maybe too, I don't know. And I'm just thinking about, you know, didn't sort of all classes go to these plays, and men and women, and you know, I don't know what the limits were of that, but I feel like they're so empowering of each person.
Could you, as the speaker, all I've got on my screen is something called iPhone.
Oh, sorry, it's Claire.
Yeah, I'd rather see Claire and maybe your face than
Okay.
iPhone. Yeah. So
I'm on my phone, so
yeah.
hold on a second.
Okay, oh, that's
Hello.
hello. So, Jacob.
apart from the overlap with the brothels, so there was a very large number of sex workers in this space with their clients, amongst the groundlings. In the galleried classes, there was a very high proportion of women coming to the theater, unaccompanied and unmasked, and it was a bit scandalous. So Shakespeare's theater had a very strong female audience, and no theater company survives if you don't give them what they want. So that's definitely reflected in the tone of the plays. Doing the plays, the comedies are often, there's a lot of cutting and a lot of manipulating what Shakespeare wrote to make it a really happy ending, because we have expectations that are very Disney-like. So Viola will be forced to smile, in the productions. Like, you need to be happier at the end so that we all go home happy. But talking to actresses in the part, they're not happy. There's something that's off. And I think Shakespeare honors a system where the men have all the power. That marriage means all the property goes into the husband's name. She loses everything. She loses her family. It's just, there's something off. That there's something to be questioned about this act. Then I think it's there in all the plays where we just look at the guys and we squint. And I think for me, there's a victory in that, because finally, we can see it. If some of us go to weddings and we sit in the back and we're like, everyone's really happy, but I don't quite get this. And then we go to funerals and we're like, finally, life, But again, it's that complementarity that we don't get a pure side. We don't get it's all good now, it's all bad now. That there's a blossoming at the end of the tragedies.
You're a bit thin for the part, but have you played Falstaff?
No, this is my COVID isolation. I'm usually much younger and much hairless. Falstaff is he's waiting.
Time to come. Igor was.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question. Even though I think it would have been better if I posed it a question ago, I wanted to ask you, Jacob, since I hope it's not a rude question, but I would like to know how did all of this that you presented us this evening, which was marvelous, by the way, and how did all of that, or did it influence, affect, or inform your own stage presence or acting, for that matter?
I've broken up with Shakespeare 3 times. I've walked away for good 3 times, and I for different reasons, and I always find my way back. I would say that in general, most playwrights are working in television and film. I have to bring stuff to make it interesting. I have to make it more complicated.
I'm really interested in that process. How do you do that? Do you give a small lecture maybe to the director or to the troupe, or?
It's different every time. It depends on the director. It depends on the production. TV and film, there's no real. It's entertainment, and it's you just get it done. Time is money. I'm more, the older I get, the less I want to talk about it, because getting up on our feet, the body has its own wisdom. So you can have a great theory. Everyone figures out Hamlet at the table, but the minute you get up to do it, the body is like, no. That's a ridiculous idea, because you're starting to deal with somebody else's eyes. You're looking into another actor, and she's feeling something, and that completely changes your body, which then changes the line that comes out. So whatever you thought the scene was, it's been completely changed by being with other people. And often in Shakespeare, because it's written to be deceptive, there are people in the scene that don't talk. So then you get up to do this great wooing scene, and you're like, oh, I'm the absolute best at this. No one's ever done it my way. And I get up to do it, and her father's standing right there. And you go, wait, you're in this scene? Wait, and there's like one little note that, yeah, the father's there. It's like, that changes everything. It's like, oh, that's the scene. Speak the lines from there. And so it's a way of like, being smart doesn't help you. You got to come back into the body, and you have to deal with the other bodies. For me, the men in particular are forced to be vulnerable. That these plays do not work if the men are brick walls. That they're all being forced to feel and to not know how to feel. They're being forced to express their feelings into language. And so, whereas other playwrights, I have to complicate, or I have to bring a lot to like make it interesting. Shakespeare, I have to grow. Every time I come to Shakespeare, I can't breathe long enough to get through 12 lines of verse, so I need to work on my voice. I can't, like, he demands a range of feeling and a range of staying in the difficult conversation. Or for me, I'm pretty happy being in tragedy. He forces me to be happy. He forces me to love innocently. So I'm always being stretched by these plays, and some of them I've done 2 or 3 times, and each time I come back, there's a different part that's revealed in the plays. I don't know how these plays were written, but I've done Macbeth 3 times, and each time I come back, I'm like, oh, that's what the play's about. And then I come back 10 years later, it's like, oh, that's what the play's about. And it's always about me and what I'm going through. But Shakespeare demands a full humanity. A gender of powers is such a brilliant concept, because we're all stretched as on this human spectrum, and some of us are better at different parts than others. So you have your Romeo. So like, I'm always talking to the Romeo because I'm not good at the happy stuff. And so I'm like, you're really good at that archetype. Like, let me like teach me the jazz. But in terms of basic approaching a character, you start with similarity, and then you work on the difference. So what I identify with myself with the character, that's where I attach. So like Richard III, I have to find a way to get to killing children as a good idea, killing my entire family so I can have a crown. For Jacob, that's really hard. If I saw Richard III in the street with a bus coming, I would hesitate on what I should do. Might be a lack of my humanity, but I would hesitate. And to play him, judgment goes out the door. And so when I played, I have to find a similarity. And so what I did is I started writing down all of the insults that his family and everyone around him in the play says to him. And I ended up with the entire cover of the page coded in insults. He's just constantly bullied. And I would read those. And by the end of it, I was like, you know what? I think I could kill a child right now. If this is my world, then the only option I have is to be king. I can't love, I can't be accepted, I have no community. The only thing to get through this is to hack my way through to that throne. And so over 6 weeks, I become the perceived other. So instead of separating, like our country is dividing again and again and again, 50-50, instead of out-grouping my perceived opposite, Shakespeare makes me become my perceived opposite. And I start to understand, oh, Richard. Okay, Richard, let's talk about how we talk to Richard. This is what Richard's hearing. And so there's a softening and a lack of judgment in an encounter. And I see this very strongly with Jerome Lewis's, what he's shared with the Bayaka, with the story of the chimp. and that they tell the story of the chimp, and men will get up and take on the chimp. So there'll be 5 or 6, and they'll sit down and continue the story. And for me, that's the beginning of anthropology, because what is it that makes us human? Well, let's look at the primates, and how are we the same and how are we different? And to become chimp, you have to lose a part of your humanity. And it hurts. To become Richard, it hurts, because there's parts of Jacob that are very sensitive to these things, and I have to let go of that to become chimp, to become dominant. And so I learn what's human and what's chimp. And then coming back to human, I have to let go of the chimp. But what that gives is also a signal that when someone acts chimp, all you have to do is point and grunt, and everyone knows what you're talking about.
Tam.
Thank you. Jacob, that was absolutely incredible. I'm so glad it's recorded so that I can go back again because like a Shakespeare play, and there are many that I'm not very familiar with, I sort of got gists of it, but fucking hell, there was so much flying over my head. But it's all there that I can go back and learn more. One tiny little thing I think you'd appreciate, on the 400th anniversary to the day of when they moved from the Curtain Theatre, from the theatre in Shoreditch, where I lived, to the Globe, we did a production. There's a guy called John McHenry, a wonderful actor. He plays Mercutio in Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. He was the head of the Shakespeare and Shoreditch Society. He's gone now, unfortunately, John. But he wrote a play about the bailiffs banging on the door of the theatre while there's a production of Tamburlaine going on, Marlowe's Tamburlaine, and they pack up and they have to leave the theatre. And what John got was 2 oxen out on the street in Shoreditch, and we took 2 timbers to symbolically represent what happened then. Was they took the timbers from the Curtain Theatre and took them over to the Globe. So we all walked down. Because it was between Christmas and New Year, I think about 1996, I think it was, 98. The place was dead. You know, it was the city of London, and so there was no one around. And we all walked down to the Globe, and Mark was there ready to welcome us, and we had a ceremony, and it was an amazing situation. I was in it with my son, who was about 10-year-old at the time. But what I wanted to ask you was that you seem to have talked about coming to this radical anthropology recently in lockdown. I'd wonder about that, because I'm a freshling with all of this as well. That how just about this discovery, has this been a discovery for you that's opened up the plays more to you? It certainly seems like that. How recently have you come to all this? And then to supplement that, of how do you think Shakespeare got a handle on all of that, or was it much more of the milieu that this is the sort of things writers were aware of back then, and so therefore all of this, sex strike theory is there to be had with Marlowe and so on, and all that? Has it opened the door for you?
Yeah, no, it's I would say that my tendency is to be celestial. I don't really my work is to come into the body. And what it was probably, I heard about Chris about 5 years ago as a small note in Ted Hughes's book, Shakespeare and the Goddess of Complete Being. And I circled it. Actually, I didn't circle it. I wrote, who? And then there was an article in Man magazine, and I thought it was a men's magazine, so I didn't look into it for 2 years. But it's an anthropological, now renamed. So I've been in conversation with Chris's work and Reg's work and Camilla's work for maybe 2 or 3 years, off and on while I'm working. And for me, actually, I got, someone sent me a production photo of the play I was doing in March, and I was in tech. I was on stage with blood magic. So I'm reading Chris Knight on stage when I'm supposed to be acting. So the universe heard me and shut everything down, and I could go full on into this. And for me, bringing biology into culture is completely topsy-turvy for me, but it does, it is the thing that all humans share, that we come in 2 forms, and on a gamete level, there is an ovum and a spermatozoa, and they have completely different plays. They have different agencies and strategies, and it affects the stories we tell. And I resist that completely. But there's a really obnoxious thing that Shakespeareans do, which is no matter what you say, there is always a Shakespearean around the table that goes, Shakespeare, no, Shakespeare said that. And it drives me crazy. But as I'm sitting in these lectures and working with Chris and Camilla, I keep sitting here going, oh yeah, Shakespeare. Because the one thing that all of these playwrights were dealing with were bodies. Every city, every story is dealing with the human body, and biology influences culture, as Chris's theory makes very clear. And it's a very uncomfortable association, I think, especially with our gender politics. It's a very difficult conversation, but we're starting, when we go into Carnival, we're starting with binaries as conventions so that we can invert and subvert them. So it doesn't matter which poles we come in, we just need whatever normative poles so we can juggle. It's just the starting point. I think in the Renaissance, gender ambiguity was huge. I think fluidity was medically was even more confusing and more flexible than we are today. Shakespeare in particular, I think it's pretty clear from the sonnets that he was bisexual. And so he knew in the body and in the heart what it was to love a man and what it was to love a woman, and what it was to be loved by both and to be betrayed by both. And so I think there's a participation of the body in being penetrated and penetrating, and like Cymbeline is the imagery is so strong in the invader and the invaded. And so at a time when colonialism's coming towards the British Empire, Shakespeare's writing a story of remember when the Romans did it to us. Just remember what it was like to be invaded before we do anything. That he's constantly coming into this and both, that I think he lived, if he was a he, and if it was one person. The last thing would be where Shakespeare sets the camera really locates the soul of the writer. So looking at hunting and gathering, hunting's become a sport in Elizabethan England. And Shakespeare was familiar with it and uses the symbology a lot. It's a very popular motif, but he's the only writer that locates the metaphor in the experience of the hunted animal. He never glorifies the hunter. He doesn't care about the hunter's experience. And so we are always being put in the role of the animal that's running, that's being surrounded. And so when you work those metaphors as practice, you embody those metaphors. Even the tyrants are saying, I'm like a baited bear and the dogs are at me. Like I'm always in a position of vulnerability, which then reorients my relationship to the world. don't walk out as a hero. I don't walk out as a tyrant. I don't walk out as a great individual. I walk out with my vulnerability, and humans are vulnerable. We're slow, soft protein packets. The big cats are gone, so we're pretending we're the big cats. But I think, I don't know if any of that answers it for you, Tam. But yeah.
Edward.
Can I ask a question?
Edward, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, go on, Edward.
So again, just to echo everyone else, that was wonderful. And I've opened up so many, different paths that we, each one individually. And one bit which I liked particularly with your talking about the theatre and the cosmology of the theatre. And I just want to ask you to talk a little bit. I've gone blurred a bit. Talk a little bit more because, of course, Shakespeare left the Globe Theatre to go to the Blackfriars, and the Black, which is over the other side of the river. And the Blackfriars is a very different kind of theatre, very different kind of audience, and it's it's inside in the darkness. And the plays which he wrote there, the later comedies, are very to the earlier comedies, and thinking like The Winter's Tale, where we have a sex strike, a Pericles, where we kind of have a sex strike as well. We've got an old witch in the Tempest, and just to ask you about those, really, because those are the three plays that you didn't mention, and the kind of symbolism of things like storms, which I know I've heard you talk about. So just to kind of pull you in that direction a little bit.
Yeah, well, Blackfriars was an extension. So the public playhouse performances continued because that's where the money was. So the plays function in both places. So for me as a performer, performing for different audiences, I think Blackfriars was much more like playing Shakespeare today, if not more so, in the sense that it's a very serious audience, it's a very educated audience. The price of admission was much higher, but there were more women in the audience. So there's a turning off of the ambiguity, because Winter's Tale, you also have a satyr dance. You have the first three acts that are the tragedy, and then you move into this pastoral setting where you have carnival, you have transgressions going on that are still for the people. It's still for the globe. The actors going into Blackfriar would have trained on the Globe Theatre, and so you still have those coordinates. But the language does get much, much more difficult in the romances, like Cymbeline, Winter's Tale. What's happening in the verse is massively complicated. It's much harder to deliver, and for me, it would indicate a much more educated audience. And mythologically, what's referenced is much more esoteric. There's a lot more hidden knowledge in the later plays. That also indicates that there are people in the audience that know it, that are getting the references and getting the structures. If these were paintings, these are much larger scaled and much more complicated paintings that are going in, but they still have the structures that work in the Globe. The other thing that I think was going on between Blackfriars and the Globe is that you just drop scenes. You cut the scenes. You cut the plays depending on the audience. There's an idea that there's a fixed end product of the play, and I don't think the plays worked that way. I think the plays were always in flux. I think they were always rewriting and re-editing. But scholarship has an idea that they were fixed works of art. In terms of, yeah, well, it's a whole nother talk, but I opened up my my makeup kit that's been with me for almost 30 years of doing these plays. And I found rings, flowers, and bloody rags. And they're all symbols of female fertility. And these are props that pop up in every single play. And they have massive consequence. So the storm is one of those things. When you go against the sex strike, there is a consequence. But the bloody rag, I mean, I had to choose what to talk about today. But this is the next talk. It's phenomenal, like As You Like It. There's a bloody rag, and it's Orlando that bleeds. But the power of the bloody rag, when it comes on stage, Rosalind as Ganymede swoons, and swooning was what women did in the medical texts, and so it reverses. She shows wrong gender when the bloody rag is brought forth. When Orlando makes his next entrance, he's no longer the lover. He can live no longer by thinking. He's ready for real life. He wants to re-engage. So the enchantment's broken for him. So he's showing wrong gender from what he was playing in the play, all because of the bloody rag. And that's it's so good because it's connected to a shutdown of the Catholic holy relics. And so the Puritan Protestant sermons are relating the blood of Christ, that was the blood of martyrs on the holy relics, as menstrual rags, and that they need to be thrown out like menstrual rags. So we have this spectrum going on in England at the time, where we don't know what this means, whether it's the blood of Christ or whether it's menstrual blood, but it is that potent. And what Shakespeare does with it, I'm tracing through the plays right now, but it depends who the character is on stage. So for one character, it's contamination and pollution, and for the other character, it's the holiest of holies. But it is the thing, it is the thing from the domestic realm that comes out into the public realm as a symbol that changes the entire world.
Can I suggest, Camilla, you come in on the order of the Garter
people. I was going to come in just to say, wow, thank you, Jacob, because I now feel like I've got a theory for Shakespeare. We've got a kind of theory to be able to. I've had a very difficult relationship with Shakespeare and never appreciated quite what side she was on, or they were on. So even though I had that excursion into the investigation with Falstaff, because that was a pretty easy one, and it highly looked as though the gender of power was this underlying motivating force of the motor of these plays. The Order of the Garter is I mean, that particular play I wrote about, the mistress and the Merry Wives of Windsor, was supposedly performed on an occasion of award of the Order of the Garter to some aristocrat. I can't remember his name now.
Harry, I think.
Yeah, you know. The Garter, the legend of the Garter is that it fell off a woman that Edward the third or the fourth was dancing with, the king, who was actually his kin, who's actually a cousin to him, the Countess of Salisbury, in fact, I think. But that's a legend, and this is the story of the Prince of Wales' original motto and so forth, and it's all dressed up in all kinds of courtly detail, but it's quite clear that it's menstrual rags, and you're just showing how there's these menstruous rags being referred to all over the place, is quite extraordinary. I mean, I sort of suspected it, but never quite was able to demonstrate it. I didn't have that kind of knowledge. What was wonderful also was that, well, talking about this, where does that continuity of the time-resistant syntax, where does it come from? Because of course, when I was tracing with Falstaff, it goes smack back onto the Greek ancient comedies as well. And it's quite clear that we're hopefully getting talk next term from Richard Seaford on Euripides, Bacchae, and so all the great Greek comedies and tragedies will have the same kind of, well, they'll be doing the same things. It's what great drama does. And this interface between what you said about the onset of this theatre tradition is coming at the point where ritual, the iconography of Catholicism and so on is being suppressed. That's very, very interesting. And of course, there must be so much that Shakespeare's drawing out of Carnival, and you're relating it to Bakhtin. So the vehicles that are bringing that time-resistant syntax, I mean, it's such a strong, powerful, popular undercurrent of all that popular festivity and ritual, which in the ancient Greek was the komoi, the Dionysiac. I know Irene and others have been talking about the ancient Greek stuff on the chat, and maybe Irene can say something. But yeah, so it is a mystery how these incredible geniuses succeed in just hitting it in the syntax. It just works it really works. They kind of don't deviate. It's a mystery that's very difficult to solve, to resolve. How does it happen?
Well, I think if we try to solve it as thinking, then it becomes about being really smart. As an actor, I know what works by what a group of humans, how they respond.
Yeah.
Shakespeare behind bars, I think, should be training for every actor, because you do Macbeth in a women's prison, and you have a very different audience when when a woman raises her hand and go, yeah, well, when I killed, it was like this.
Yeah.
Right? And Shakespeare got it right.
Right?
Like, but right now the galleried folks are now in the orchestra seating. And so we're insulated even on stage. And so to take these plays and to play them for children, they'll tell you what they think. And what syntax works is the one that works for humans. And so all your brilliant ideas are only self-reflective. That's that inner point that has no outer coordinates that Bakhtin talked about. Shakespeare's working with performance and going, that brought the house down. That made everybody upset. That one brought all the lovers together. Whoa, that doing it this way brought the rich folk and the poor folk into the same movement. I cut a section from the presentation, but the galleried folks are looking down on two shows. So they're looking at the groundlings being very, very festive and very, very loud, and they're looking down on the players. So there's this class overhang coming down. Now the theater, or the stage itself, has based on the mystery plays, the wagons, has an inner and an upper locus where the high characters are playing the scenes within the reality of the play, and then the fools are on the outside, and they straddle the here and now of the audience with the world of the play. But when you're up center, that's the most powerful part of the stage. You have the most authority. You force everyone to turn their backs to the audience and break the connection and look at you. But you're so far away from the audience. So you're above them, looking down at the characters in the scene and looking down at the audience. So what that organization does is aligns you to the power structure. And the groundlings experience is that the king is just like those guys looking down at us. Yeah. The real bastards are right there, but we're too stinky for them to like pay a penny and stand with us. They're looking down at us, and Richard II's up there, who's going, shall I come down? Shall I come down? Yeah, you're going to come down. Whereas the person that's 5 feet away from me is Falstaff. and so the coding in the play, or like thinking of like Malvolio coming out on the balcony and saying, do you have no respect of time or place to the festive activity? That on the page, the censor's like, absolutely, that's good Protestant like throwdown. Great, all of this speech is great. You can do this play. You put it in the space, and it turns the entire audience against Puritanism. And aligns all of us with the characters that are being yelled at.
Yeah.
Now you add to that, that this theater is being run by sex workers. that the people that are serving the alcohol are from the brothel that are owned by the same people. Henslow owned the Little Rose and then built the first Rose on Bankside and used the same name because the business was good, the Rose. The Playhouse and the brothel are the same. So if you're on that stage and you're a man in authority and you call a woman a whore, you have just alienated 800 people that are standing around you. It is not an you do that. I don't know. You do that at Covent Garden, and maybe like you get applause. You know, you're uplifted. But you do that at the Globe, it's dangerous. People are going to throw beers at you. People are going to. Like, and that's the subversion that reading the text you don't get it. You just get Malvolio is bringing order into this.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just to add, because Chris wanted me to say it, on the Order of the Garter, the point is that the Order of the Garter creates the English coat of arms, the royal coat of arms. So basically, the royal coat of arms is a woman's menstruating cunt. That's what it is. And that's the power. That's the royal power. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but yeah, that's it.
with the lion and the unicorn, the opposites, of course, the opposites you were talking about.
The Elan bull and the moon.
And the motto, "Honi soit qui mal y pense," is exactly apparently that was his response. I mean, evil to him who thinks of evil, and because was he or was he not having sex with this close kinswoman?
Was his mistress, yeah.
With his mistress, and but yes, the middle of the English coat of arms, that round thing, is a cunt.
Well, it's the Vescus Piscus.
Yes, of course, yes, of course, yeah. But from which comes all royal authority, and that is where cosmic authority, as opposed to just violence, cosmic authority comes from that source between the legs.
Yeah, Elizabeth had a great tug of war with the Order of the Garter, because the other story, the other legend, was that it was a token exchange between men on the battlefield, and so Elizabeth, because the Privy Chamber was women and women didn't have political power, she was completely on her own, and so she needed to get a bastion of male solidarity on her side politically, and so she went after the Order of the Garter that didn't allow women. And so she started coding them. She started manipulating all of the dress and codes so that she became the maiden, and they were all her suitors. And so she pushed very, very hard that it's a menstrual rag. It's very, very, very hard that this is a female symbol. And then near the end of her reign, she had a portrait painted with the garter around her neck, holding St. George. And on the processions, she would show up and be very, very dressed very flirtatiously with all of these men following after her. So she used it very, very strongly to code it the way that we're reading it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Just a quick question.
And lots on the chat. Oh, yeah.
I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, I vaguely remember a connection being made between Giordano Bruno and Shakespeare. And obviously, well, I've assumed that this was primarily working at the celestial level. I don't know if you know anything about this and whether Bruno was also thinking in terms of gender of power, or just to throwing that in there, really.
Yeah, Bruno's never far. He's a little before Shakespeare, so direct contact would be difficult to work out. I mean, first of all, we don't know who Shakespeare was. Shakespeare could have been in direct contact, but certainly was within the Sydney circle, had contact. So within one or two people. Yeah, in terms of like Hamlet would be like the most points of contact with Bruno, and Love's Labour's Lost and the School of Night would be where Bruno pops. But in terms of methodology, it's Bruno that really works in his theory of mutability. So he's looking at poles, and so it's somewhere in front of me. He talks about that humans are only happy when they're moving, and so if he says that being hungry is terrible, but it's pleasurable to move towards eating. But once you're satiated, it's intolerable, and you just wish you were hungry again. And so that human pleasure comes in moving between binaries. And so as long as we stay in motion, life is pretty good. But the minute that we get stuck, it all falls down. And I think that's absolutely what Shakespeare's building off of. Bruno wrote, if you've never read it, but the expulsion of the triumphant beast. He wrote this in England, published it in Paris, and was burned for it. But it's extraordinary. It's set up that Zeus is aged, and he's horrified by what the gods have done to the constellations. That all of these symbols are about rape and murder and violence, and they go through a system of taking all of these symbols down, putting them in a natural place where they belong, and putting concepts, beautiful things into the night sky. And so truth becomes the main point. And he works through, and it's Sophia that communicates to us what the gods are actually talking about. And so it's bringing Sophia back into England in the most extraordinary way. It's a really incredible book, and he knew that he was going to get burned for it. It's pretty clear. But I don't know that there was direct contact.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I will share this. This is one of the strikes against him in Rome, where he compares where Orion is used for Christ. So this is Bruno's voice for Ian. This is because he, Orion, knows how to perform miracles and can walk over the waves of the sea without sinking, without wetting his feet, and with this, consequently, will be able to perform many other fine acts of kindness. Let us send him among men, and let us see to it that he give them to understand all that I want and like them to understand, that white is black, that the human intellect, through which they seem to see best, is blindness, and that which according to reason seems excellent, good, and very good, is vile, criminal, and extremely bad. I want them to understand that nature is a whorish prostitute, that natural law is ribaldry, that nature and divinity cannot concur in one and the same good end, and that the justice of the one is not subordinate to the justice of the other, but that they, nature and divinity, are contraries.
Wow.
So, yeah. Shakespeare won't say that. Shakespeare will show that in a scene.
He won't show it because he doesn't want the same fate.
Well, he won't say it explicitly. He'll act it out. He'll have nature and divinity, Edgar and Edmund, act it out. And so we're seeing the same argument played out in a way that doesn't get someone burnt. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just breathtaking, Jacob. I'm kind of speechless. It's just absolutely breathtaking what you've seen and conveyed. It's just extraordinary. And of course, I can see why being in the body for your job you know, it comes out just that, I don't know, just somehow, as you say, big smart isn't big smart at all, but the body knows better.
Yeah.
And when you have to act it out, that's just a marvelous constraint. And somehow those stories came from the bodies of the performers, you know, and everybody involved, you know, all the sex workers, and somehow, what, as you said so beautifully at the beginning, you just pick up a book, and that's a kind of blueprint. So what is it? You know, what's DNA without, you know, blood and a pulse?
It's like the fluid construction grammar. Instead of needing horrible, complicated Chomsky structures and theories, you have the fluid construction grammar by speaking language with bodies and against other people and with other people's bodies. It's perfectly clear how you learn language. Your language teaches itself to you.
Just to sort of translate, in case anyone doesn't know, it's the alternative to the Chomskyan version of universal grammar, which is all in the head and there's a bunch of kind of genetic instructions to the body, and it's in one head. By far the more influential model of how language works these days, and my favorite version is that of Adele Goldberg, is that actually language and what we call grammar is just what remains. Like when you dance or sing, you can't be inventing it all the time. There has to be some pattern, some rhythm, something that builds up as when you say drumming, an expectation of what comes next, and the child just hears like change and constancy, and the bit which is constantly there, we call it grammar, but the child doesn't need to call it grammar. It certainly isn't coming out of the head. It's coming out of actually engaging in singing and dancing and speaking in a kind of rhythmic, rather repetitive way, as you do with kids in the classroom. You know, good morning, Mrs. Robinson. You do a sort of chorus, you know, and all of language starts with kind of with the body, is what this fluid construction grammar is saying, but it's a beautiful example of how we need to turn the cognitive revolution, which is a huge counter-revolution. We need to turn it on its head, and what we're doing here is that we're turning all that nonsense, that post-war nonsense, that cognitivism, that so-called revolution, which is a huge counter-revolution, on its head. And Shakespeare was clearly a master at doing that. Absolutely wonderful, and of course it so beautifully links up with what Mona Finnegan was telling us about touch and the body and corporeal morality, morality which doesn't come from the body, which comes from the head. That ain't morality. There's no good to anybody. It comes from the body, as it does in Carnival, of course, and so many other things which make life worth living. And resistance, and including Tam Berners-Lee's magnificent episode when he when he jumped in front of a bus during a strike, and kind of made local history, because it's out of resistance and solidarity, and you know, in the sometimes small ways, turning the world upside down, that comes, I don't know what to call it exactly. Wisdom isn't quite the right word. Knowledge isn't quite the right word, but whatever it is which makes life worth having and meaningful, comes from not just the body, but when bodies connect, and as Camilla was just reminding us, what's called grammar comes out of voices, breaths, lungs, tongues, eyes, you know, smiles, laughter, connecting up, and then the elements of that which are constant, we call it grammar. But the grammar isn't running things at all. It's coming out of the practice.
But the other thing is that by doing it, the brain and the body releases the hormones and the chemicals that bond.
Of course.
And that we're in this very odd stage where excellence is the thing. There's the great version of the song that we record, and then we just play that. We don't sing anymore.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare's writing at a time there, if you wanted to hear your favorite song, somebody had to sing it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to hear your favorite music, somebody had to play it. Okay. If you wanted to hear the poem, someone had to memorize it, because people couldn't read, people couldn't write. It had to be in the body and expressed. And so that magic of going down to the public square and having your town's tenor sing wasn't about being the best. It was about the gift of it. And if we can just gather in smaller groups and just do it, just dance, just sing. You don't have to be good at it. All of this elite stuff that went on to Shakespeare, and Shakespeare going into the academia and into the university, which he was never there. He was never meant to be there. These are subversive plays. The theater is outside of that. If we can turn off our screens, if we can turn off our MP3s and sing badly and dance badly, because the body will still release the chemicals that bond us to each other.
The plan is to do that in Glasgow every new moon, building up more and more powerfully towards this probably wretched sellout COP26 conference. But the plan is to sing, and I don't know, and as Tam's been describing, you know, with his own incredible ballads about liberty trees, and again resurrecting exactly what we're talking about, but bodies connecting up with each other through huge bodies, and the hugest bodies are these huge trees which we can hug. So yeah, but
and the amazing thing I picked up on as well about these liberty trees that were in Dundee, they were put up, people garland and trees in support of the French Revolution, and being able to have that COP connection as well, that the fact that the last one was Paris, and we move on from that in the place that has the biggest public park in Europe and more green spaces than anywhere else in Europe. Glasgow has. So I'm imagining possibly it has more trees than anywhere else, and everybody can twin with a tree. And we can all have our own trees that we can, I say as my New Year's resolution, I touch trees every day. Sometimes it's just like today with just little branches. I feel the effect in my body as soon as I do that each day. The chemistry in me transforms just by recognizing the importance of touching them. It's amazing.
Well said, Tam. Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll get there. Who knows?
You will. And they do Shakespeare outdoors here as well, just in our local park. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've got to come out of the theatre and then start the riots, start the revolution. There's no question about it, and I can't wait. I can't wait to be able to get out and get back into my body and touching yours, and making a hell of a noise. And shouldn't be too long now. And I just feel, as what Morna says, is that we're such hunger for touch now, such huge hunger, having been deprived of that most important of all the senses for so effing long. I mean, let's just hope that when finally we can find each other and touch each other and hug the trees and hug each other through the trees, that some kind of revolution starts to get underway, because we sure as hell need it. It's 8:30. Can you just say, can you close it for us, Jacob? Just close it, and I'll press the button. We'll stop the recording.
Oh goodness. Yeah. Well, I resonate very much with what Tam said about the experience of connecting with a tree. We don't need to explain it. We don't need to know how it works. I mean, the sciences are great, and when it comes to viruses and vaccines, I'm all for it. But when it comes to human experience, if science goes after a first kiss, they'll say that it's two lips that haven't touched before, and then dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin are released, and there's bonding, right? That's not human experience. When it comes to experiencing the first kiss with that person that has never been before and will never be again, and that happens, the experience of that will change your life and change the world, change your lens on the world. And so touching the tree, we become tree, we become part of the world. For some reason, we have a great affinity for dogs and cats. And that the same people that have affinities for dogs and cats still look at other human beings as not human. so that there's something going on with identity that we're not practicing experience. We're not valuing the experience of the body. And in the theater, we have groups of people that come together, and most of us probably wouldn't be friends if we met on the street. But we come together, and then within 3 days, we're family. Why? Because we're not talking about politics. We're dancing, we're singing, we're touching, we're creating ritual space, imaginative, symbolic space. And in that process, regardless of what that world is, we're working together. We're developing harmony. We're finding the limits to when individual expression breaks the whole thing, and finding that point and pulling back so that the whole thing keeps going. And in that way, we become human. And that way we become sociable. And that way we become mutually dependent on everybody else, where we're all useful and vital and empowered, and at the same time completely vulnerable to everybody else. And in that, we lay down our power to dominate, because if you're exalted, that means diminishing everybody else. And by relinquishing the power to dominate, we then agree that nobody will dominate us. And that's the basis for the egalitarian handshake. So yeah, so that's, that would be my cry. Do bad Shakespeare, dance poorly, sing awfully, sing off key, find those movements and experiences that release the chemicals that bond us, and don't explain it. Because that's the last thing. Explaining, ex planus, right? Out, flat. When you explain things, you flatten them out. So if you explain a heartbeat, the depth of a heartbeat, if you explain it, you get a flat line. And that's biology. They explain life by killing things, right? Not great for a community. So bring that heartbeat up through experience, value experience, value the body.
Bravo, Jacob.
Thank you.
Magnificent.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.